it's been a few years ago since the last time we spoke for 68 Kill. You know, I did sort of ask a question then about whether you had any intention to direct, and you know, here we are now talking about, you know, not your first but your second feature. You know, how did that transition go from, you know, producer, stuntman, actor extraordinaire into directing?
The work was, the transition in terms of job responsibilities or work was not that drastic, but I think the emotional transition was pretty profound. And just sort of, I'd said this in another interview, but like as a producer, I was standing behind the people who were sort of taking the biggest risk, or the most exposed to risk. And I think getting that confidence to be the person standing there, sort of charting the path for the project creatively, was a really big step for me. So although I knew sort of the mechanics of what needs to happen to set up a show and approach a scene and talk to actors and stuff like that, just being like ready to be the person having those conversations was like a giant step forward. So yeah, it's been exciting, and also to really live fully in the creative and the conversations with performers and the department heads. It's feels like being in school again, you know, where you're really talking about ideas and how you're going to pull ideas off. It's exciting.
I mean, Barbara Crampton's been trying to bring JAKOB'S Wife into being for years. You know, at what point did you get involved, and what was it about the project that really spoke to you?
Yeah, when I was out promoting Girl on the Third Floor, she had touched base and said, "Hey, I've got this dream project. Would you want to read it?" And I read it, and what made me want to do it was Barbara. I could see this parallel between where she was in her career and where this character was in her life that was absolutely perfect for Barbara. And so I, even before I'd finished the script, said, I want to help Barbara do this in whatever way I can. And as I was reading it, it just was so clear, like what the potential for that thing could be, you know. And we hadn't seen, certainly in genre, but in movies in general, stories anchored around characters of that age. And I felt like there was a number of movies that I loved, you know, from Altman or Cassavetes or you know, whoever, about women that age. And I was like, well, we can do that here. And so when I said, I'd like to do it, but here's what I'd like to do with the script, and I went through sort of those ideas, they said, yeah, this is in line with you know, what Barbara wanted the movie to be. And it became a very really fun process of digging into her personal life and Larry's personal life, or maybe that's not the right word, asking them questions about their personal lives that could maybe inform these two fictional characters. So yeah, irregardless of how the movie turned out, the process of making it with those two was already a victory.
I mean, there's a saying in, in the music world about, the awkward second album. With this being your second feature, were you more nervous, or were you more or less nervous than the first time around?
I think probably all of my films would be equally awkward, because that is just a part of my DNA. I will probably feel awkward every time I'm making them. No, I mean, there were certainly, you do a post-mortem on everything. and you learn lessons from the process of making it. And from Girl on the Third Floor to Jacob's Wife, there were certain lessons I learned, and from Jacob's Wife to the next one, there's certain lessons I learned. And you are trying to always remember to look for ways to get better and to diminish that part of yourself that thinks you know it all. And certainly as a producer, I think you can come into it being like, yeah, no, it'll be fine, we'll figure it out. As a writer director, I think you have to be a bit more open to not knowing the things and listening to other people, and then making decisions.
I mean, something that I really liked is, as different as Girl on the Third Floor and Jacob's Wife are, they almost feel like two sides of a similar coin. You've got the girl dealing with this toxic masculinity, Jacob's wife with, repressed, with being a repressed woman. What are your thoughts on how the two films sort of compare and contrast with one another?
Yeah, I think they're a part of a trilogy about men learning lessons. I mean, obviously Jacob's Wife is anchored in Anne's experience, in her sort of rediscovering her agency. So it's not fully about Jacob's, but I think there's a thread there. It's something that, as an individual, I certainly learned a lot about over the past decade of my life, and it's showing up in the work.
And I mean, you've worked with Barbara on a number of projects before. What is she like as a collaborator, and what did she give to Anne that nobody else could have done?
Well, she's an incredible ambassador for the genre. So you're getting this person who shows up with an enthusiasm and just a brightness that sets the tone for every day while you're making the thing. Like, if people are looking at the behind the scenes stuff that she's been posting recently, like, that's her personality on set. So as a filmmaker, you've got this heavyweight, super enthusiastic, very experienced champion on your team, and you're like, yeah, it's like having the Hulk if you're on the Avengers. Which is a terrible comparison, but just that power. I'll think of something better later. But then on the actual, for the job, for the role, as an actor, I think that the thing that I was most concerned about before we started the process, and most happy with at the end of the process, was how vulnerable she allowed herself to get. Because especially in any job, but especially as an actor, if you reach a certain point in your career, sort of playing against type or exploring different aspects of yourself or showing sides to yourself that maybe haven't been required, like, all of that is potentially challenging. And she was completely interested in creating a character that played against type, to bringing some truth from her own experience as a married partner. And I think all of that allowed us to create a character in Anne that had a lot of layers, that had a real history and a real trajectory on where she wanted to go. And that would not have been possible if Barbara were not as open to that exploration as she was.
And I mean, this exploration takes place, within the world of vampirism. I mean, vampires never really seem to go out of fashion. What do you think it is, that has made them so immortal for audiences?
I think you can use it to talk about whatever you want in the time period the movie's being made. Like, as I sort of went back through, the history of vampire movies, because one thing I wanted to do with this was sort of honor the classics and sort of re-examine the movies that had sort of, that I had as personal favorites, but then also sort of look at ones that maybe I missed. And one thing that I noticed is, depending on the time they're being made, the vampire figure is just a prism to look at what else is going on in culture and society in that time period. Not every movie, but certainly enough of them. And I think that's something really exciting that maybe with a slasher you can't do as much. Zombie movies slightly, but there's something about a vampire that figure, that character can bring into the story whatever theme those characters or that movie wants to talk about.
And I mean, I guess in a way with Jacob's Wife, you kind of got both sort of like the old school image of a vampire and then the slightly more modern, more sort of humanoid looking thing. Was that an intentional thing to sort of show the the juxtaposition of how the world has and hasn't changed over the years?
Yeah, the hope is to be subversive, to upend the audience's sort of expectations, and on this one, there's a feminist, there's it's being driven by this feminist idea. So to pair that with a classic vampire look felt really fun. So it's like, here's a known quantity that you recognize, horror fans, and here's a new quantity that maybe you haven't seen. And putting those two together is kind of what I like to do.
And I mean, Girl was gooey, and Jacob's Wife is bloody. Which is easier to handle, the goo or the blood?
The blood was probably easier to achieve. The goo is thicker. and I think the mechanics of how the blood worked, like, I just wanted these vampires to be exuberant and to have their attacks really reflect like fireworks, like that's emotionally how they feel, to literally just be so full of life on the terms that you want. I just wanted visual fireworks to sort of reflect that. So it could be an explosion and you get it. The goo aspect, I mean, making Girl, like, I just had a collection of grease and tar and other sort of weird fluids in a container that art department made me. And just every shot that we set up, I would just smear something on something. So it was a different movie. It's a more toxic movie, or it's talking about more toxic things. So the process of making it was a little grosser, I'd say.
I mean, I was so happy when you revealed in the behind the scenes that Barbara was wearing a wig, because as a blonde myself, I just saw all that fake blood and thought, oh my god, you've ruined it. But thank God for hair and makeup, eh?
Yeah. Our makeup girl, hair and makeup girl, Mary Sheck. It happened. The hair was red. She said, "I'll be right back." Took the wig, because we still had stuff to shoot after that. And it was like, okay, none of us were expecting that. And, I think when you're working with people who love this genre and love putting the horror in a horror movie, like, they can just roll with it. And she's like, "I got this," and came back and the problem was solved. So it was pretty rad.
I mean, the film's been doing, really well. It's out, it's out now in the US, and it's coming to Shudder over here in the UK in August. How have you found the reception, and what are you hoping that the UK audiences experience when they watch it?
Yeah, it's been really nice to see that people are connecting with the intention of the movie. The fact that people are enjoying Barbara's performance, they're getting to see Larry in a meaty role. Bonnie Aarons is getting a chance to sort of expand her fan base. Like all of it is just like feels really good. It's like that was the goal, is to give these actors a chance to really star in a movie, not just be in a movie, but be the stars of the story. So that's been really nice, and people seem to be connecting with the theme and understanding, like, hey, this is a movie that maybe doesn't wrap things up. It's a movie that talks about how a relationship is constantly in motion, and it requires two people to be super conscious of their partner's needs. So that's been cool. And it's also been really nice to see so many sort of old school meat and potato horror fans be like, I love the practical effects. So yeah, it feels like a win. And I guess, the UK and vampires, like, I kind of feel like I can't do a victory lap until it's out in the UK and we get the seal of approval from UK fans. So hopefully they'll see we tried to take all of the Gothic elements that sort of defined vampire films and put it in small town America. So, when you see big shafts of light coming through a small suburban home, that is a direct homage to the sort of Gothic castles of Hammer horror and other sort of more classic vampire stuff. And I hope that people enjoy our riff on it.
And very quickly, you mentioned earlier that you sort of saw Jacobs and Girl as part of a trilogy. Have you started working on that third installment, whatever it may be?
Yes. more soon.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and I'm sure UK are going to absolutely adore it. So,
well, if I need to come over there and double mask and pass out promotional materials myself, I will. But thank you so much for always taking the time, and it's great chatting with you.
You too. And I mean, it's the week, it comes out the week before Fright Fest over here, so it's a perfect thing to get people in the mood for the festival. So
Yeah, well, Alan Jones said the nicest thing about the film, and I was just like, I felt like Dad had said, "Good job, son." I was just so relieved. It was, yeah. So it feels like a victory.
Well, I will let you get back to your day. I'm going to go and rescue my husband from the baby, and I will see you in London at some point in the future.
Yes, and have a good time at the festival, and I will let you know about the next project as soon as I can.